We work in partnerships. We work with the federal government. We work with our industry allies. And partnerships are key to us. We have a lot of honesty and mutual respect in those that work best. And so this morning you might have heard reference by Dr. Clifford and Dr. Scherer about partnerships with the states. And NIAA, you know that this works, and so we're really proud to be a part of that. And we're looking forward to finding a way to work with NIAA in the future, Len. So we're looking to that. I'm going to talk about two things today. A little NASDA 101 very quickly. And then I was asked to speak about NASDA's policy with respect to one issue that's already been referred to today, and that would be the GMO labeling debate. So we're going to go through two things, and on the latter one, I'll try to focus on risk, challenges, and solutions. I think that's part of the title of the event. So NASDA, obviously, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We represent the 50 commissioners, secretaries, and directors in the states, and also including in the 4 territories. We are very strong and unique in our voice, and I want to take a minute to explain this to you. Of the 50, 12 are elected, which happens to be most of the South, and also Iowa and North Dakota. But we are co-regulators with the federal government. And that means a lot. Each of you who works for a State Department of Agriculture, we all together, collectively, we have a very strong voice that's very unique in Washington, D.C. And so since we work on with USDA, EPA, FDA, you know, when NASDA speaks in our united voice, it's a very strong voice. But in addition, our members are advocates for agriculture, so they run a lot of programs advancing agriculture in their state. So in the breadth of what we do together, I know a lot of you work for the state departments of ag, it's quite amazing that we represent the diversity of ag in the U.S. and we represent co-regulators with the federal government as they're pushing more down to us, but also advocating for ag. So it's a really exciting time to be here. In terms of animal ag, our members oversee animal health, disease response. You've been hearing a lot about that. Animal feed issues, everything about antibiotic resistance, veterinary feed directive, working with the state vets, and on animal drugs as well. And we have 22 affiliates who represent the state technical leads. And they have their own autonomy, their various groups, but NASAHO is the one that Dr. Keller is president of at this time, the Assembly, a very important affiliate of NASDA's, and then also AFCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials that you heard about. So under each of the commissioners, secretaries, and directors, we have these different buckets of regulatory responsibility, from pesticides, fertilizer, food safety. We even have Apiary Inspectors of America, so we got it all. So I was really pleased to hear Dr. Schmidt's presentation and the leadership that he played in Iowa. I was on some of those calls, and at times it became almost a heartbreaking scenario to listen to how we had to work around HPAI. Anyways, our mission is new, and I wanted to share with you the key points. Grow and enhance ag, forge partnerships, create consensus to achieve sound agricultural policy. And we do this in this nexus between the state departments of ag, the federal government, with very strong partnerships with our stakeholders. And this year we're celebrating our 100th anniversary. And so I want to send greetings to you from Director Greg Ibaugh from the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. He's our president this year. So under this mission, NASDA serves as the united voice inside the Beltway. We do focus on ag policy, and we can say we're closest to the customer. And we do that because we're in the states, boots on the ground. And trust me, a lot of people in the agencies and on the Hill don't understand where we come from. So our new strategic plan really is focusing on policy advancement. And so I thought I'd take a minute to share with you how we intend to increase our policy impact and influence. Every year we have an annual prioritization by our board of directors on our policies, and right now our top tier issues, believe it or not, are, international trade and harmonization. So we're big advocates for Congress ratifying TPP. Our second one is the Food Safety Modernization Act, and I noticed nobody referred to that earlier. But this is a whole new game changer in terms of a new law, FSMA, in food safety. It's a preventative culture as compared to a reactionary culture. So look forward to that. And the states are heavily involved in implementing FSMA. We also work on waters of the U.S., which we do not support. And we're heavily involved with EPA on that and the Hill. And we also work in an area you may not think about, but bees are livestock too. So pollinator health is one where the states actually show quite a lot of leadership in terms of state-managed pollinator protection plans. So every year in two of our conferences, NASDA members can bring a policy amendment forward on an issue that you may be having in your state or in your region. They're discussed, they're voted on by the full membership, they can be amended. Everybody gets one vote, and at the end of the day, we pass these, and they become a permanent part of our NASDA policy statement book. And I know Paul knows these policy books get pretty thick, don't they? We're in the process of revising and shortening those and making them more practical. And so the policy staff that we have in D.C. works heavily on strategic issue management from there. So I think we've referred to the fact that we know agricultural biotechnology is safe. We have a very robust regulatory process. But here's the current issue that in Washington, D.C. and even beyond has been the GMO labeling debate. So this may not seem like a food security or a trade issue, but is it? Vermont's mandatory on-package GMO labeling law is going to go into effect July 1. So there's the clock is ticking, if you will, and there's a lot of scurrying around with respect to Vermont's law, which will have impact on all the other 49 states. And due to this lack of congressional agreement was referred to earlier, the food companies now, and that just occurred right before Easter, but the food companies now are stepping out and proactively, voluntarily complying on a national scale to avoid the kinds of monetary fines that they see coming if they have to deal with one state that drives how they distribute among all 50. So we have General Mills, Campbell Soup, Mars, ConAgra Foods, and Kellogg Company all announcing their voluntary intention to have on-pack GMO labeling. So it's moving in that direction, even without the Hill. So what is our policy? I thought I'd share a little bit with you. NASDA fully supports the current federal framework for regulating ag biotech. So again, that's EPA, USDA, and FDA. And we support the delivery of timely registrations or deregulations, whatever you might say. And I thought I'd take a minute here. This is called the coordinated framework in general, this regulatory process. It was published in 1986, way back when, by the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House. And currently, President Obama recently, by executive order, asked that we take a look at the coordinated framework, and the agencies should see if it's time to revise it. So I just wanted to share with you that there's a whole lot of good that could happen there, but a whole lot of mischief. The other thing is it probably won't happen by the end of his administration, so that's good. That timeline isn't going to suit President Obama. But nevertheless, these three agencies, they just finished 3 public meetings on this topic, and what's up for grabs there is, are we over-regulating these foods? Have we learned enough about ag biotech that we can not back off, but sort of lighten up on the rigor of the regulatory process? But what's also at stake is it's opening the door for this debate on other technologies. Gene editing, well, we can start with marker-assisted selection, but gene editing, zinc finger nucleases, gene deletions, you name it. And many of these are extensions of traditional breeding. That might be one school of thought, so they don't need to be regulated. But another school of thought is, particularly by the NGOs, is all of those techniques need to be regulated, whether it's for livestock breeding, poultry breeding, or for crops. So that's what's happening on bullet number 1. The second one is, NASDA, we do not support state or local initiatives that prohibit or restrict ag biotech. And that goes for the labeling as well. And so we are unique in this regard. We're a state-based organization, so you think we'd want to have our state rights to have our individual laws. But in this case, it's crystal clear to the commissioners, secretaries, and directors that we need federal preemption. So we support federal preemption and the regulation of ag biotech. Bullet number 3 is as it relates to health, safety, and nutrition of foods, we support the FDA as the agency that has the role and responsibility to determine the appropriate food labeling. And so guess what? This is not new. This has been happening since the first traits were approved in 94, 95, and 96. We've got, 80% of grocery store products with a biotech-derived ingredient. There's not been one human health or environmental health incident directly related to ag biotech. So FDA's labeling policy is here that we do not label because these foods or these products are the same as and as safe as their conventional counterparts. So that's been working since the mid-90s, basically. And they do, part of their labeling policies, they do require labeling if you've changed a chemical characteristic, maybe an amino acid or some other component that consumers should know about. So that's part 3. The last part of our policy is about marketing labels. These could be for the purpose of labeling foods with or without GMOs, and they should be, we agree, be developed as a voluntary federal system to avoid a patchwork of state-by-state standards. So an example of a marketing label is the USDA National Organic Program, which is devoid of the use of biotechnology. And that is not about safety or health. So this is a different bucket of labels, and we support having a voluntary system in that regard. So I think in general, across ag biotech, we have a strong statement. We're viewed as having a unique statement because we're a state organization, but we support, first and foremost, having federal preemption so we don't have this patchwork of 50 different laws. So what's going on right now? Well, right before, in late February, I guess, Senator Roberts, who chairs the Senate Agriculture Committee, he came forward with his labeling bill. And this followed on a House bill that was from last summer. There are many voices in the debate about the Senator's GMO labeling bill. One would be the Coalition for Safe and Affordable Foods. This is a coalition that's led by the food industry, Grocery Manufacturers Association, in concert with agriculture. And they do not support mandatory GMO labeling. Indeed, NASDA has also supported this bill. And in this bill, Senator Roberts asked for immediate federal preemption on GMO labeling, which means that the Vermont law would not go into effect. And secondly, that USDA would lead this national voluntary labeling system for GE foods. So that's what's offered in the bill. And we, as NASDA, we supported that. Our letter went down to the Hill. There was another letter with several hundred groups on it as well. And indeed, in the Congress blog for something called The Hill that runs around inside the Beltway, published probably several times a day, Commissioner Lorraine Merrill, this is her op-ed, she's from New Hampshire, and she also supported NASDA's view and said that Senator Roberts had a common sense solution for consumers. And she wrote a very nice, very clear and concise statement. So in this debate, we have a unique state voice, and we are proud of that. And the commissioners, secretaries, and directors, work hard to pull together a unified view. So if Congress doesn't act, but on July 1, the Vermont law is going to go into effect, and this has a lot of impact. So now we're going to talk about these risks, challenges, and solutions. So risk number 1, today, a multi-state patchwork of state authorities that do regulate food labels and interstate commerce there's already been at least one incident where they've denied a Vermont-compliant label in their state. So it's not Vermont, but it's another state, and it comes from the State Department of Agriculture. And so they have denied the label that you might call Vermont compliant. So this could be highly problematic if the Vermont compliant label doesn't work in another state or another region of the U.S. So I think that's a big risk. The other risk, of course, is the 50-state patchwork of laws regulating GMO labeling. And then the last risk is a worst-case scenario, but this would be the slippery slope to reformulating foods with to remove GMO ingredients, basically ignoring the science and technology that have gone into the long success of agricultural biotech. And I think there's no expectation we're going to go there, but we have to understand that this indeed is the goal of many of the extremist groups that we do work with inside the Beltway in D.C. So what are the challenges? Well, today, legislative delay is a challenge. The clock again ticking to July 1. And we saw before the Easter break when Senator Roberts' bill actually didn't succeed, by the way. I don't think I said that. But there was a flip-flopping of votes, not only among Ds but also among Rs. So we have some Ds who still want that mandatory on-pack label that says it contains GMOs. And there are Republicans, some Republicans who don't want to give up that state right to have that law and have in their state. We're also dealing with always with heavy voice from the GMO extremist groups. There's a Just Label It coalition. It's sort of the exact opposite of the coalition I mentioned earlier. We have the debate about marketing labels versus those that are from the regulatory process on health and safety. So those would be, I would say that's the FDA and USDA labels. And then we have a really big challenge with the real versus perceived consumer demand. I mean, the question to me always is who really wants to know if GMOs are in their food? I think that the food industry does a massive amount of consumer research. They think they're responding to consumer demand, but in reality, there's a lot of scare tactic being used, and fear is generated, and funds are raised by some organizations who have challenged consumers with this. Instead of it being a shared values discussion with facts, it becomes quite the opposite. So what could be some solutions going forward? Well, from NASDA's perspective, our members see that we would like to see immediate federal preemption of GMO labeling for food products, meaning that a state doesn't have the opportunity to instigate their own labeling law. And secondly, another solution would be to establish a USDA-led voluntary framework for something called, new word, GMO disclosure. So this just popped out right before Easter, before that bill was voted on in the Senate. And what is GMO disclosure, you ask? Well, it's not on-pack labeling, but what it is a way for a consumer to get to the information that they might want to know. So it'd be something called SmartLabel, which has been developed by FDA, and many of the companies are using. Social media, websites, 1-800 numbers. So you can imagine that a product would have some mechanism, the QR code or something, you buzz it, and then you can go to a site and get this information. So the new term GMO disclosure emerged, and this was actually an amendment made to Senator Roberts' bill before it did not succeed. So NASDA joined forces. We were very keen on, along with 750 other food and ag companies, to support this bill. And it did fail. And our focus was on the need for federal preemption so that we didn't have this 50-state patchwork. And also, GMO disclosure, if it's voluntary, this seems like a sort of a user-friendly way to give the consumer information. Don't ask me what GMO disclosure means in words. I don't know if it means contains GMOs, or if you talk about the soybean crop with what trait, or I don't know the answer to that, but that would have all been to be determined. So I think it remains to be seen whether Congress has come up with a solution. Today the coalition is working on the Hill with Senator Roberts and Senator Stabenow to try to find a solution, and they'd like to bring this bill back forward quickly. And we'll see what happens. I think this is just one agricultural policy issue that NASDA works on. I wanted to share it with you, mostly because Leonard said I had to talk about GMO labeling, but it's a hot issue, folks. This is real-time information. I would like to share with you that we deal with many ag policy issues, thanks to NIAA for all of the good work that you do. We would love to partner with you in a unique way. You're already doing it with all the state veterinary officials, so it seems like a no-brainer to me. But the one thing I will leave you with is we are focused in the future for the new administration and beyond to stand up for federalism. And this is the concept that the state should be consulted before regulations are finalized and certainly before they're put in place. There's an executive order defining federalism, and it's the role of the federal government to come to us before they gouge us with something that we really don't want. So there's a lot that we have done with the White House and other state agencies. We go to the White House, and last year we articulated our support for federalism, and it's not just consultation, it's let's have an accurate cost estimate for the price of having to implement FSMA or having to deal with WOTUS or having to respond to HPAI. Let's use best available science. They have to be reminded about that. Let's have flexibility for the states. We have to have that as well, because you all know each state is different. And so we're actually working closely with APHIS in this regard. Dr. Clifford and Dr. Scheer, we have an open line of communication constantly with them. We work closely with FDA on FSMA in that regard. We don't work so well with EPA on WOTUS. There's not enough communication there at all. But I did want to share with you that I think federalism is a path and principle forward for NASDA in the future. So I'd just like to say we're thriving on partnerships. We look forward to working with NIAA as we provide solutions to livestock and poultry producers in the future. So thanks for everything you do, and thanks for having me today.